Everyone should mark on their calendar the date, August 1st, 2025. At the heart of this story is the firing of Erika McEntarfer, who on that day, as the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, was given her pink slip for simply reporting economic data that displeased the president. Now, this action signals a very dangerous shift, where facts are no longer safe if they contradict political narratives. When truth-tellers are silenced, the public loses faith in the institutions that underpin democracy and the economy. Now, let me be clear, it's not just us that's seeing this happen, but the entire world. And more importantly, our enemies. The America we knew is rapidly slipping away. It's been said that when truth is punished, trust dies. Welcome to That's Life, I Swear. This podcast is about life's happenings in this world that conjure up such words as intriguing, frightening, life-changing, inspiring, and more. I'm Rick Barron, your host. That said, here's the rest of this story. In one of the most chilling moves of this presidency, Donald J. Trump has confirmed what many feared, that facts themselves are now political enemies in his administration. With a single stroke, he has upended one of the most bedrock principles of a functioning democracy, that reliable, nonpartisan data can and should guide government decision-making. On August 1st of 2025, Trump abruptly fired Erika McEntarfer, the respected and Senate-confirmed head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, a move that should alarm every American, regardless of political affiliation. Now, what was her offense? The data coming out of her agency no longer flattered the president's narrative. Job growth had slowed for 3 consecutive months, a sign that perhaps all was not as robust in the economy as he claimed. Rather than accept the numbers as a wake-up call, Trump declared war on the truth itself and shot the messenger. He accused the BLS, a historically apolitical agency, of conspiring to undermine his administration. And then, like so many others who have dared to stand in the way of his delusions, McEntarfer was cast out. Her firing was abrupt and unsubstantiated, sent a clear and terrifying message to public servants across the federal government. And that is, facts that conflict with the president's story will not be tolerated. This is no longer just about Trump's fragile ego for firing anyone who contradicts him. This is about the institution dismantling of the federal government's capacity to report the truth, an authoritarian tactic wrapped in the guise of administrative control. The consequences could be catastrophic. The BLS is one of the most trusted federal institutions, tasked with compiling and reporting accurate data about employment, wages, inflation, and productivity. Its reports form the foundation of policymaking, business strategy, academic research, and public understanding. Firing its leader not for corruption or incompetence, but for producing unfavorable numbers, is a threat to the integrity of every federal agency. The Trump administration claimed that McEntarfer was dismissed to preserve data integrity in a grotesque distortion. In reality, her ouster cast a long, dark shadow over every report and data point that follows. From this point forward, every statistic released under Trump's watch will be suspect, not because of any inherent flaw in the data itself, but because the public can no longer trust that it hasn't been manipulated or censored to fit the president's preferred narrative. Worse still, this move will have a chilling effect on data collection across the government. Career servants, the scientists, economists, and statisticians who quietly maintain the gears of a vast and complex system now face a new reality that their livelihoods depend not on professional excellence, but on political obedience. I mean, the message couldn't be more clear. Produce data that aligns with the government storyline, or be prepared to face the consequences. Trump's attack on McEntarfer and the BLS was not rooted in evidence. Experts from across the political spectrum, including former agency heads appointed by both Democrat and Republican presidents, affirm the structural impossibility of manipulating the BLS jobs report. The data is compiled by a dispersed team of professionals who conduct independent surveys and calculations long before it reaches the director's desk. There is no secret lever the director can pull to alter the numbers, and Trump surely knows this. As I said, the world is watching, and what they see should unsettle every American. Bill Blaine, a seasoned London-based bond trader and author of the widely read market newsletter, Blaine's Morning Porridge, sounded an alarm that cuts to the core of global financial stability. He wrote, and I quote, "Friday, August 1st might be remembered as the day the U.S. Treasury market effectively died. For decades, interpreting U.S. economic data was an art built on a single, unshakable foundation: trust. That trust has now been shattered. And if you can no longer believe the numbers coming out of Washington, then what exactly can you believe?" End quote. This is not just market chatter. It's a stark warning from outside our borders that the credibility of America's economic signals, once the bedrock of global finance, may be slipping away. Trust once lost is rarely rebuilt, and without it, the entire architecture of the financial system begins to look less like stone and more like sand. But evidence has never been Trump's concern. What matters is perception, and in his view, if facts damage his political standing, those facts must be suspect, and those who report them must be purged. This is the Orwellian playbook in full swing, the systematic erasing of objective reality, replaced by a singular, state-sanctioned version of the truth. Trump's approach is not unlike the disinformation campaigns employed by autocratic regimes that have long manipulated national statistics to deceive both their citizens and the world. To appreciate the peril of Trump's actions, one need only look abroad. In Greece, years of underreporting deficits led to a devastating debt crisis. In Argentina, chronic inflation was hidden by a government that refused to publish accurate data, forcing investors to assume the worst and sending borrowing costs soaring. In Russia and China, GDP employment numbers are carefully curated for maximum political benefit, divorced from the reality experienced by their own citizens. In firing McEntarfer, Trump is following in the footsteps of leaders who replace facts with fiction, not to govern better, but to protect their own power. And the cost to society is enormous. When governments lie to themselves, they cannot fix what is broken. When leaders stop listening to data, they lose the ability to govern competently. And when citizens stop believing the data, society becomes a boat without a rudder, vulnerable to manipulation and prime for division. McEntarfer firing is not an isolated incident. It is just the latest salvo in a much broader war on knowledge and accountability that has defined Trump's presidency. His administration has consistently targeted scientific research, environmental data, and health statistics that contradict its political goals. Some examples. He moved to defund the Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii, a critical site for measuring atmospheric carbon dioxide since 1958, because its findings provide undeniable proof of climate change. He shut down a federal database that tracked misconduct by law enforcement officers. Third, he ordered the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, to remove critical youth behavior data from its website, only to repost it later under legal pressure, but with a disclaimer suggesting the findings were unreliable. Now, each of these actions chips away at the scaffolding of political trust. Each one diminishes our collective ability to see the world clearly, to act wisely, and to hold power to account. The monthly jobs report, like all data collection, is imperfect. It is the best estimate, not a gospel. Average, the first estimate of job growth has been off by about 57,000 jobs since 1979. Now, these imperfections are not evidence of conspiracy. They are part of the scientific process. As more data comes in, revisions are made, estimates sharpened, and understanding deepens. This is how truth works in the real world. It is messy and constantly evolving. But in the hands of a president who views facts as enemies, that very process becomes a weapon, not to improve the truth, but to discredit it entirely. Trump's economic advisor, Kevin Hassett, went on Sunday talk shows to push the lie further, claiming that revisions to the job data showed partisan patterns. No evidence was offered. No studies were cited. No analysis provided. Why? Because none exist. Beauty of transparent data is that anyone can look at it. And when economists and statisticians do, they find no such patterns. What they do find is that the BLS has gotten better over time, not worse. The real problem isn't bias in the numbers. It's bias in the Oval Office. The BLS is not without challenges. It relies on a massive survey of roughly 60,000 households. Now, let's be very transparent. This is a very difficult task in today's world, where Americans are increasingly suspicious of unsolicited calls and surveys. Participation is declining, and data quality is suffering. The solution? More funding, better outreach, and investment in modern data gathering tools. But instead of proposing solutions, Trump is actively making the situation worse. He has repeatedly denied the BLS for funding it needs. Last year, McEntarfer warned that without these new resources, the agency might need to cut 5,000 households from its survey. Now, that reduction would further degrade the quality of estimates and increase the likelihood of error. A president who was seriously interested in improving data quality would fight to fund the agency, not decapitate it. But Trump doesn't want better numbers. He wants numbers that serve him, or better yet, no numbers at all. The heart of a functioning state is information. As political scientist James Scott once noted, governments cannot govern effectively without standardized, reliable data. They cannot allocate resources, write good rules, or respond to crisis. The original meaning of the word statistics is information about the state. Remove statistics, and the state becomes blind. And this is exactly what Trump is doing, blinding the government, and by extension, blinding the people. He is substituting centralized authority for decentralized fact-finding. He is turning citizens into subjects asked not to think or question, but to believe. And what happens when we stop believing the data? When we are told not to trust the numbers from our own government, we lose our ability to judge, to compare, to hold leaders accountable. Democracy doesn't end with a bang. It ends with a shrug, when people no longer know what to believe and stop caring. We can take some cold comfort in knowing that McEntarfer's firing won't necessarily halt the production of reliable data. I mean, there are still professionals within the BLS and across the government who are committed to the truth, but we cannot expect them to operate under siege forever. When leadership turns toxic, even the strongest institutions can rot from within. If Americans want a functioning democracy, they must demand truth and defend those who produce it. We must reject the notion that truth is negotiable, that facts are partisan, or that loyalty to a person is more important than loyalty to reality. This moment is more than a political skirmish. It is the battle for the soul of the Republic and the U.S. Constitution. Do you remember that, Congress? And unless we take it seriously, we may soon find ourselves in a country where facts are whatever the president says they are, and reality is just another casualty of power. In what could only be described as a Broadway-style performance for the audience of visibly captive reporters, President Donald Trump summoned the press to the Oval Office on August 7th for what he clearly hoped would be the drop-the-mic moment. His prop of choice? Oversized charts on an easel, because nothing says the economy is thriving quite like a middle school science fair presentation. The stunt came just days after the latest jobs report suggested that the economy was limping, not sprinting, a report that apparently offended Trump so deeply, he responded by firing Erika McEntarfer. Standing behind him was Stephen Moore, a senior visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation, co-author of Trumponomics and longtime Trump hype man. Moore gleefully flipped through the charts like a teenager eager to impress the principal, doing his best to puff up Trump's record while tossing shade at the former President Joe Biden. The whole exercise was transparently aimed at resetting the narrative on the U.S. economy, because while Wall Street may be hanging in there, Main Street is looking at sluggish job growth, rising inflation, and, oh yes, those beautiful new tariffs Trump has slapped on imports. Translation, you're going to be paying more for stuff that you want to buy. Moore proudly declared that he had called Trump personally with data proving that the BLS had inflated Biden's job numbers by 1.5 million. His implication? That it was all intentional. Trump, without missing a beat or offering a shred of proof, said, "I think they did it purposely." Of course. Revisions to job reports are routine, especially in volatile economies. But why let that ruin a perfectly good conspiracy? The reality is the economy is a stubborn beast that rarely obeys any president's talking points. Since January up to early August of this year, employers have added just 597,000 jobs, a 44% drop from the same stretch in 2024. July's numbers were somewhat grim, only 73,000 new jobs, with May and June's totals revised downward by 258,000. Now, Biden's Achilles heel was inflation, hitting a 40-year high in June of 2022, which helped pave Trump's return to the White House in 2024. But guess what? Thanks to Trump's tariffs, inflation is stirring again. Goldman Sachs now predicts July's report will show consumer prices up 3% from last year, compared to just 2.3% in April. I mean, nothing says economic rescue like making groceries and gas even more expensive. But still, Trump insists he's ushering a boom. You know, the golden era. And when the data looks somewhat blah instead of miraculous, he leans on Moore, the same man Trump once nominated for the Federal Reserve before Moore withdrew under Senate scrutiny. This time, Moore claimed that the median household income, adjusted for inflation, has risen by $1,174 in Trump's second term. His source? Unpublished Census Bureau data, the kind no one else can verify. How convenient. Well, that's an incredible number, Trump gushed. If I would have said this, nobody would have believed it. Well, you know what? On that, at least, he's probably right. So what can we learn from the story? What's the takeaway? There's an old saying that democracy dies in darkness. Well, data is the light. Statistics are a way a country sees itself clearly, the way we measure progress and setbacks, the way we hold leaders accountable. And if we let that light be dimmed, if we accept a government that fires people for being honest, then we're entering a new kind of darkness. A darkness where facts are filtered through political loyalty, where truth is whatever the president says it is, where public trust becomes collateral damage in the fight for power. And that's how democracy doesn't get bruised, it begins to break. That said, the moment of democracy breaking under Trump is not coming. It's already here. Well, there you go, my friends. That's life, I swear. For further information regarding the material covered in this episode, I invite you to visit my website, which can be found on Apple Podcasts, for show notes and the episode transcript. As always, I thank you for the privilege of you listening and your interest. Be sure to subscribe here or wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. And we'll see you soon.